Now, Executive Director at Democracy Development Program, Dr. Paul Kariuki, joins us via video link as we reflect on South Africa's democracy amid the commemoration of Human Rights Day today. Good afternoon to you, and thank you for joining us here on the SABC at this hour, Dr. Paul.
Thank you so much for having me, and good afternoon to all your viewers.
So we're obviously shining a spotlight on Human Rights Day in South Africa in commemoration of the Sharpeville massacre. And South Africa marking 30 years of its democracy this year. How important is this Human Rights Day for the country in reflecting on our democracy at large?
I think it's very important to remind ourselves of where we've come from as a country, that this day didn't just arrive to where it is today so that we can be able to celebrate it. Lives were lost, and a lot of other hardships came through to make sure that this day is celebrated by not only this generation, but generations yet unborn to come for many, many years to come. It's important to remember that it was not without a cost, the first thing. And the second thing is to know that it's now in our hands as a nation, as citizens, to make sure that we safeguard the rights that we've been bequeathed by the generation that laid their lives for us, to be able to defend these rights, to claim them, and to sustain them so that future generations can also celebrate them and enjoy them. So it's an important day to remind ourselves that there is a cost to this day, and the cost is very enormous. It involves everybody's to participate in not only just to defending these rights, but also to safeguarding them and ensure that everyone has equal access to them.
Thank you very much for touching on that and for those opening remarks, because I also wanted to look at beyond the strides that have been taken 30 years into democracy. What are some of the challenges that come to mind from your vantage point 30 years in, particularly during this election year?
Well, you know, we have traveled a journey as a nation, and we cannot deny that there's a lot of good that has taken place over the last 30 years. But our challenges still remain, and even some of them have become even more enormous, given that the context that we are experiencing at the moment is not the same context that we had in 30 years ago. And so we have to see everything in context so that we can appreciate the journey that has been traveled, and at the same time also appreciate the challenges that now we are experiencing that require newer ways of responding to those challenges in a way that makes sure that it does not infringe in the rights of other people, and also at the same time promotes our country to go forward in terms of creating an environment where every voice is heard and respected. Because some of the challenges we're experiencing now is that things like some of the claims that citizens want to or are demanding from government at different levels of governance just keeps on falling on deaf ears. And of course, that is exacerbating the relationship between the citizenry and the state in most ways. So it's important that as we grapple with the different challenges that we're experiencing now, it's important that we also create that room for ensuring that every voice is heard from all quarters of our citizenry, and to ensure that no one is left behind. And that must not be a cliche. It must be a reality to be experienced daily by citizens who are really expecting a lot from their state.
No, absolutely, especially because despite the 30 years of democracy, the country is still grappling with slow economic growth. There's housing challenges, issues of social grants, damage to infrastructure, youth unemployment. And so perhaps as we also look at the issue of constitutionalism and rule of law in a post-apartheid South Africa, I mean, there have been significant developments on that front. That framework continues to help us abide, as per Constitution. What are your thoughts about those developments 30 years in and into this transition of democracy?
I think firstly, it's commendable that as a nation we have a framework to work with. Because in instances where there is no framework to work with, it becomes like everybody shoots from the hip, so to speak. At least for South Africa, we have a framework to work with, provided for us in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. However, it's also important to mention that it is really at this point in time needing to strengthen the institutions that really help us to safeguard the rights that we've been bequeathed to us by the previous generation. And I'm specifically speaking to the Chapter 9 institutions, for example, that really have this mandate, especially the South African Human Rights Commission and the Commission for Gender Equality. Such institutions are very, very important in our democracy. and to help us to not only just to ensure that the rights are available and accessible and can be claimed, but also safeguarding against abuses on either side, whether the citizen takes advantage of them or the state is slow in providing the resources and the services that they are constitutionally mandated to provide to citizens, irregardless of their nationality, gender, creed, whatever the case may be. So there is a recognition that there is a framework that has already been put in place to help the state facilitate access to these rights. Secondly, is strengthening those Chapter 9 institutions that are mandated to ensure that these rights are claimed and safeguarded by both citizens and the state itself. And thirdly, to strengthen those state institutions, especially now that we see, because of different political challenges that we're experiencing as a country, some of these institutions are really, you can see they are under threat to be able to execute their mandate. So strengthening those state institutions, especially Chapter 9 institutions, to carry out their mandate is very, very important at this point in time, because they are the last strength of hope for the citizenry. When the citizen gets to a place where there is no other place to turn to, they turn to Chapter 9 institutions. And if these Chapter 9 institutions are weakened because of the political landscape that we are experiencing in the country, then the citizens have no other place to go to, and it to be a hopeless situation, which we should not even entertain in our thoughts that we can get to a place of such hopelessness.
Dr. Paul, I know there's so much to unpack. I just want to conclude by also, looking at electoral and governance reforms in this democratic dispensation, just because it is also a election year. If we're shining a spotlight on our electoral systems, political party dynamics, just the role of civil society at large in fostering accountable governance. What are you observing as we conclude this chat?
I think there is room for doing better than what we've done so far as a civil society and also as state and political parties. One thing we celebrate is that there's room for engagement and even contestation of ideas. However, what we would like to see more of is that whatever we have agreed or contractually agreed between the state, the political parties, and civil society, that those agreements find the light of the day. It's not good to have recommendations and resolutions that do not get implemented. And I think one of the challenges we've been experiencing in many aspects of our citizenhood is that there is very limited implementation of the agreements and the resolutions that have been made. So if there is one thing I would like to propose in such a day like this, those kind of agreements that we've agreed between the state, the political parties, and civil society and the citizenry, whatever resolutions have been agreed that are able to move forward the nation must see the light of the day. They must be implemented.
Thank you for weighing in at this hour and for those sentiments. We'll leave that conversation there. Of course, as Human Rights Day commemorations continue, Executive Director at Democracy Development Program, Dr. Paul Kariuki, just joining us and weighing in there.